Right now, we're joined live by former U.S. diplomat Jim Jatras. Jim, here we go again, it seems. What do you think about Donald Trump's decision? Was it unexpected?
You know, when this whole, let's be honest, false flag, this whole Douma hoax first came up, I expected an almost immediate response the way President Trump did last year. He held off for a few days. There was some indication. The heads were cooling. Maybe we would wait for the OPCW inspectors to get to Douma. Some people who have been following this very critically even seemed to think we were out of the woods. And I kept thinking we weren't. I think it was clear he was going to do something. And I think it's unfortunately either a function of just how misled he is by all the really bad people he's put around him, which, by the way, he has to take the blame for because he appointed them, or how scared he is, how boxed in he is by all the various scandals that have been aimed at him by the very same deep state whose agenda he is now implementing with this strike. Let's be honest, if you're Al-Qaeda and their various offshoots in Syria, you've got to be very happy tonight.
Now, Jim, while we are speaking, we've got split screen with you, and then we also have some images live from Cyprus, where we're seeing airplanes taking off from the Cyprus air base to Syria, which is, I guess we can say, is part of this ongoing attack, ongoing strikes. But if we go back to this situation in Douma, there is still no evidence of a chemical attack in Douma that we've seen, or compelling evidence that would necessitate a strike on this scale. Why do you think he decided to take military action at this time?
Oh, I think preventing a real investigation in Douma was one of the reasons for it. Look, let's be clear. Even if the accusation of what happened in Douma was the work of the Syrian government were absolutely true, this action still would not be justified, in my opinion. It certainly would not be legal, and it certainly would not be time urgent. So what exactly is the big hurry here? The big hurry, in my opinion, is that you've got the inspectors on the ground in Damascus now, ready to go to the scene and confirm what I am morally convinced is the case, is that there was no attack, and even if there, by some chance there were, and I don't think there was, it certainly was not the work of the Syrian government, just as we saw with Khan Shaykhun last year. I think this timing was directly involved timed to make sure that inspection could not take place, especially after the Russians pointed the finger, and I think truthfully, at the British, because we know that MI6 supports the white helmets. MI6 was behind the Steele dossier. MI6 was implicated in the Skripal poisoning in Salisbury. There are a lot of very dirty British fingerprints here, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if Theresa May was very, very keen on pushing Donald Trump to move ahead on this as fast as possible.
Now, in his remarks, Donald Trump deviated from his prepared remarks. We have a transcript of what he was supposed to have said, but he deviated from that a little bit, directing his comments directly to Iran and Russia, asking why they wanted to be associated with a murderous regime. Also saying that hopefully someday the United States and Russia would get along, but then maybe not. He also said that these three countries, the U.S., the U.K., and France, have marshaled their righteous power against barbarism. Where do you think this decision could lead? Do you think that it could possibly spiral towards a military conflict directly with Russia?
Yes, of course it could, and that's what we need to see in the next day or so, however long this attack lasts. What exactly gets hit? Are Russians killed? According to the reports I've seen, this is not just an isolated hit on an airbase somewhere. This is in Damascus. Who knows in what other parts of the country? Who else is going to be the target of these strikes? I don't know what the Russians will do in response. It's not up to me to say what they should do in response to this. As far as what he said about Russia, he had indicated something like this in a tweet the other day, that we could do so much to help Russia with their economy, somehow suggesting to them that if they walk away from this evil Bashar al-Assad, we are going to help them with their economic development. And there's so many things wrong with that. To start with, are we going to walk away from our dictatorial Saudi friends or destroying Yemen? I don't see anybody threatening anybody over that. And I think you also have to put that in the context of the expulsion of Russian diplomats on the Skripal hoax, the sanctions that were recently thrown at Russia by the United States, Britain, and several other countries that a number of people are interpreting as aimed at regime change, an open invitation for oligarchs to get together and stage a coup in Russia. I don't think anybody in Russia in their right mind would take what Mr. Trump said as anything really but a threat. You do what we say or we will destroy your economy. Well, if you do what we say, maybe we will help you then. I don't think anybody should believe that.
Now, Jim, we're getting reports from Reuters that there are already explosions heard in Damascus. Also, Reuters saying that the Barzeh district in Damascus has been hit by U.S. attacks, specifically scientific research facilities located in that area. Donald Trump has said that he is targeting Damascus's ability to create chemical weapons. How extensive do you think that the bombings will be there in Damascus and in Syria?
I don't know, because let's be clear about it. I don't think Syria has chemical weapons. I think that the Russian effort to get them out of there after what happened in Ghouta in 2013 was genuine. It was certified as genuine by the OPCW. This notion that these strikes are actually hitting chemical weapons facilities, I think, is a conscious, transparent lie. And that these targets are being chosen for other reasons. Now, what those other reasons are, I don't know. Are they decapitation strikes? Are they trying to murder Bashar al-Assad? Are they trying to decimate the Syrian government? I don't know. But what we can say is, once again, we find ourselves acting as the Air Force of all these jihadist terrorists, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Jaish al-Islam, Ahrar al-Sham. It is really morally reprehensible.
Now, we're also getting a word that the United States is allegedly using Tomahawk missiles to target several targets in Syria. One thing that I'm interested in, and definitely interested in your take, and I can kind of gauge where we might go with this, but Saturday, the OPCW experts were supposed to start their work in Syria. Now, why do you think they decided to strike just one day before their work was supposed to begin? I mean, if the investigation is supposed to start on Saturday, don't you think that they should give that investigation some time to get going before they decide to do this military intervention?
Well, of course they should. If they were interested in the truth at all, you'd think they would be demanding that. They would want those inspectors to go in. In fact, they would say, we would like any independent teams from any countries to come in and inspect this and to get as much information as possible. You notice that you heard Nikki Haley saying the Americans, the French, the British have all independently come to the same conclusion. First off, I don't believe a word of that. And secondly, if they had such information, why won't they make it public? Oh, well, they can't because of sources and methods, of course. This is the same transparent lie we got about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It's the same lie about Gaddafi being ready to massacre his own people in Tripoli. It's the same lies we got about the marketplace bombings in Sarajevo or about the Rajak massacre in Kosovo. The trouble with false flags is they work, especially when you have a compliant media that just relays like a bulletin board everything that gets churned out by the deep state. And you notice that at the same time, we have this tightening of the screws on any independent sources of information. RT was just taken off the cable system here in Washington about 2 weeks ago. We've had the Twitter and Google and Facebook and other social media taking off things that are considered propaganda, which means they don't match the official narrative. The damage that's being done here is not just the threat of a U.S.-Russia war in Syria, which is obviously a terribly deadly consequences for everybody, but in terms of the strangling of freedom here at home to facilitate this kind of aggression, I think should be terrifying to all Americans.
I should also point out, Jim, right now we're getting word from Syrian state TV that their air defense systems are, in fact, working to counter U.S. strikes. Of course, this is where, they say the first casualty of any sort of a conflict when it comes to war is the truth. So we have to be filtering all of this through this lens, if you will. But in the past, when we talk about, the Cold War and we talk about things that have happened in the past with Vietnam and with Korea. These were all thought of as proxy wars, whereas you had the capitalist side versus the communist side. Never directly was there U.S. versus Soviet confrontation. Right now, there are boots on the ground with Russians there in Syria. If the United States is striking against Russia, I mean, it seems like this is a lot bigger than things that we've seen in the past, or has the potential to be.
That's right. Well, let's be clear. The political war being waged against Russia in the last few years, and I would say this goes back at least 10 years, ever since we lost control of Russia after Yeltsin left office, is that it is much more vicious than anything that was ever directed against the Soviet Union. What Soviet leader was ever demonized in the Western media the way Vladimir Putin has been? Not even Stalin was ever demonized in the Western media. And that was largely, in my opinion, because a lot of Western liberals, self-styled progressives, actually sympathized with communism as an ideology. They thought it was a good ideology. Well, of course, being Russians, they make a bad job of it, but the ideology and its intentions are rather good. But since Russia has recovered itself as Russia, it's a relatively conservative country, certainly in a European context. Christianity is a very strong moral pillar of Russian society and even of the Russian state. And I think these people really, really do not like that in their kind of anti-traditional, postmodern approach to, I would say, almost like an anti-civilization that they are promoting. I almost have the sense sometimes that we and the Soviet Union ideologically have sort of switched roles, where the godless revolutionary power in Russia's a conservative national power. And I think that's one reason there is such a hatred for Russia, and especially for President Putin, among the leading classes in the United States and Western Europe. And I think there's a certain recklessness attached to that. Back during the Cold War, we were careful. You know, my father is a retired fighter pilot. He can tell you how careful we were during the Cold War to make sure there was no direct confrontation between U.S. and Soviet forces. Here, there's almost a kind of a glee that we might confront the Russians directly or kill a bunch of Russians, as you'll hear on American television all the time regarding that incident a few weeks ago back in the Euphrates, where evidently we killed an unknown number of Russian contractors. I think there are people here who are eager to kill Russians.
Jim, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to go down the rabbit hole with me a little bit. Simple question: who benefits from all of this?
Nobody well, let me back up. Obviously, regionally, Israel and Saudi Arabia think they're going to benefit from this, but if this turns into a major regional conflagration, their calculations may turn out very badly. So I think they're among the intended beneficiaries, whether they will benefit from it or not. Certainly the deep state and all the liberal interventionists and the neoconservatives in the Republican Party, a lot of never-Trumpers, by the way, who have been from day one trying to subvert the result of the last election, they have won because they now own him. He dances to their tune. He's jumping up and down like a monkey on a string. They own him. So they have been victorious in this. And of course, behind them is the deep state. Again, that term has gotten to be much overused from having been virtually unknown a couple of years ago. But when we talk about the resistance which is centered in the CIA and the NSA and the FBI and the Department of Justice, and let's not forget, and on the other side of the pond, MI6 and GCHQ, they're all extremely happy. I think it was John Kirby, the former State Department spokesman, said the other day regarding the expulsion of the diplomats, this is very reassuring because it tells our friends in Europe that Donald Trump is not calling the shots, but the professionals with whom they're in contact every day are making the decisions. And unfortunately, I think that's true.
All right, former U.S. diplomat Jim Jotras. Of course, when situations like this happen, you're one of the people that we want to talk to. You're someone who I wanted to talk to when I heard that Donald Trump was going to be speaking, even before I had heard him speak. I'm sure that this won't be the last time we discuss this situation here on RT International.